Hello, in this video we're going to talk about the precursory information we need to move on in this semester. So if you want to follow along as I go, actually let me go into student preview mode so you can see what I see. And we can go to lessons precursory, and this is what we're going to have. You'll see a link down here for this desktop presentation. So all right, so information security fundamentals. I'm going to just go into presentation mode. All right, pretty. All right, so again, information security, InfoSec, cybersecurity. I kind of highlighted that, pseudo highlighted that. Network security. What do we want to call this? Again, we call this class Internet Network Security. I guess I'll make a shout out to Professor Maynard, who has hence retired, but he developed these courses. Geez, that must have been the late 2000s or maybe even the early 10s. Anyway, I think it was late 2000s. So, you know, he was doing this as a brand new course, and that was the name he came up with. So. Anyway, or Internet Network Security 3, or Advanced Security Topics, or whatever. The point is, there's lots of different names. Most people, the lay people, will call it cybersecurity. Because of that, people in the industry prefer the term information security or InfoSec, maybe to show their. Anyway, everyone wants to be special. So when the lay public kind of does something, the people on the inside want to call it something different. InfoSec, information security, is what the insiders like to call it. Cybersecurity is what a lot of buzz marketing there. All right, simply put, though, it's about data accessibility, confidentiality, and integrity, right? We want to make the data accessible. So we're going to talk about different kinds of attacks a little bit, but if we have a denial of service attack and it's taking down our system, then it's not accessible, right? We want it confidential. We want data that other people are not supposed to have, not to have it, and that's what confidentiality comes down to. Integrity. Integrity means the data is correct. If it's deleted, it's not correct. If it's encrypted and it's not supposed to be encrypted, we can't read it because of ransomware, it's not correct, right? Integrity means the data needs to be correct, right? So it's about making sure data is accessible, confidential, and maintains its integrity, right? So backups, integrity comes down to backups, hashes, right? We've talked about hashes, where a hash file is created for large data sets, and we can verify that the data hasn't been modified. There you go. Bolted on or built around relationship with IT. Remember that early IT information technologies, early computers were more, I'm going back all the way to the 70s, 80s, and even the 90s. The first, I shouldn't say the first. You can go all the way back to the 40s to say the first gen. Second gen, when it actually started getting into businesses, though, and started becoming widespread, right? The second generation. I'm making that up. That's not official. So, but in my mind, the second generation, right? The 70s, the 80s, and the 90s. IT was about get it working. Right? It was amazing if it worked, right? Well, cool. I can send an email from one person to another person. It was amazing, right? Just to get it working. Security wasn't even on the radar for most of the 70s and 80s. In the 90s, it started becoming an issue, right? It's like, wait, I can send an email, but anyone can read it. That's kind of a problem, right? So information security tends to be kind of a built-on thing. Modern day IT, we're more security conscious. It's in the news, but again, at the end of the day, a lot of IT is trying to put out fires, try to get things working. The server's down, get it working. Well, I don't have time to worry about security. I'll get it working, and we'll worry about security later. But then there's another fire, so you don't have time to put out, to fix the security of the first thing, right? So security tends to be kind of bolted on. Going back to that real quick, this point right here. I'll do pointer. Also, I'll put it right here in the middle dot. There you go. One more thing is a lot of different organizations have different ways to organize it. Information security can be a separate department than IT. That happens a lot, actually, more than you'd imagine. So there can be a combative relationship between IT and security. If they're two different departments and they both have two different ways to handle a problem, in the long run, they might end up with different ways to do things and having a confrontational relationship. So, all right. So, what are the key terms? What are the key concepts of information security? Well, we have an asset. An asset is any item with value, essentially, right? If that, be it information, be it access, be it anything that has any kind of value, right? A threat. It's an action that might cause harm, right? So destroying that asset, stealing that asset, if it's information, copying that asset, encrypting that asset, those are all threats, right? A threat actor is a person or element that can carry out a threat. I don't like using the word in the definition, but in this case, So again, it could be by the way, important concept here. It could either be the person or an element, right? When I say element, it could be a automated system. It could be a virus, a worm. It can be a program, right? It's not necessary. It might have a person behind it, but it also could be a function that could happen. That could also be a threat actor. Okay. A vulnerability is a flaw or weakness that enables a threat actor, right? So again, a vulnerability is somewhere, the classic phrase is a chink in the armor, right? There's a little where the armor connects up to each other, right? And where you can get through the defense, right? That's a vulnerability, right? So we can have a firewall up, but we have a web server underneath. That web server is running an old version of Apache, which has a known vulnerability. That vulnerability is going to allow that person to modify that web server and maybe get a breach into the network, right? That's a vulnerability. And then we have risk, right? Risk is a situation that involves exposure to danger. So, so putting in that web server exposes the company to risk, right? So it's any situation that's exposed to danger. All right. So to illustrate, I have a bicycle here. It seems like a rather nice bicycle. It looks like it looks like a 21 speed, right? I was looking at the gears. There you go. So again, this is our asset, right? This has value, right? So someone could steal it, right? That would be a threat, right? And this person clearly, if you saw that person walking down the middle of the street at night, you'd be a little leery, right? They've got a crowbar and a flashlight and is hiding their face, right? So you can maybe assume that that's a threat actor, right? So the threat is they're going to steal the bike, right? They can steal the bike, right? They could just simply damage the bike. He's got a crowbar. He can just go through and destroy all the spokes or bend the wheel or something, make the bike unusable, right? That's another possible threat, right? So keep that in mind as well. That's where we're going to stay at that, right? So in that case we had an asset, which is the bike, a threat, which means they could destroy the bike, they could steal the bike. Threat actor was the person with the crowbar. A vulnerability. So as you can see right here, the bike is unchained. It's not restricted anyway. That's a vulnerability, right? There's no key to it. There's no lock to it. There's no way. There's no butt recognition system on the seat to make sure that to lock the system. Although someone might want to work on that butt recognition system. Anyway, so that is a vulnerability, right? Anyone can get on this bike and ride off with it, or that crowbar can easily destroy things, right? Those are both vulnerabilities. Okay, and so therefore this is a risky situation, right? And we'll talk about how we're going to deal with that risk next. Okay, so what can we do about the risk? Well, we can avoid it, right? Be aware of the situation, and be aware and just avoid the situation. Don't buy a bike, right? Accept it, be aware, but do nothing, right? Just have the bike out there. Transfer to a third party. We can buy insurance, so that way if someone steals our bike, we can get a new bike. They'll pay for it. Or we can mitigate the risk, right? We're aware, we'll take some basic steps to lessen the risk, right? What can we do that will make the situation? So going back to our bike analogy, right? We can, I have a bike. I'm afraid it's going to get stolen, so I can just not buy a bike, right? I'll walk, right? But I can also just accept the risk. I can sit there and say, I'm buy the bike, but someone might just steal it. I'll just leave it outside, and if someone steals it, someone steals it, right? The other thing I can do is I can call an insurance company and say, hey, I want to insure this bike, right? I'm sure the insurance company would love for me to lock it up occasionally, and they're going to rely on the fact that it's an inconvenience for me to get a new bike, and I just can't just leave it out and just keep buying insurance and getting new bikes, right? But I can call an insurance company and say, hey, I'm afraid someone's going to steal my bike. Let me buy insurance. That way, if someone does steal it, you'll give me some money and I can buy a new bike, right? That's mitigating the risk. That's transferring the risk. And then finally, we can mitigate it, right? Which is the good old-fashioned, here's a signpost right here. That's my pathetic attempt at making a signpost. And a bike lock, right? So we can lock up our bike and onto a signpost. So now they have to figure a way to break through that chain, which there's ways around that too. There's vulnerabilities, obviously. Again, a good bolt cutter, particularly a hydraulic one, it can get through those really quickly. So, but anyway, there are vulnerabilities, but we've made it more difficult. And at the end of the day, that's what information security is, right? We're not making things impossible, right? We're not going to hire 50 guards armed with machine guns and bazookas, and then transport the bike in an armored vehicle, right? Okay, well now it's locked down really well. Yeah, but is it sensible, right? It's going to be this constant push-pull, and is it accessible, right? If I want to hop, I can also bury this thing in concrete, right? I can bury the bike in concrete. Haha, you'll never get the bike. Well, I'll never use it too, right? Remember, we have to make the asset accessible. We have to make sure integrity, it still works, right? In this case, for the bicycle, the chain is still there, the wheel, right? People sometimes take the front wheel off their bikes, and then they can just pop it back on, but it's more extra work. So we have to make it accessible. We have to keep the integrity of the device, and we have to, confidentiality, which kind of falls apart in the bike example. All right, so now that we know about who are these different threat actors that exist in the world, the way we can classify it is by motivation. How much? What's their motivation? Because their motivation is going to change how they interact. If they're interested in money, then they're going to act a different way than if they're hacktivists, for example, where they're interested in causing damage for a cause, right, or stealing data for a cause, right? So motivation matters. Skill matters, right? So script kiddies being the lowest skill? We call script kiddies essentially, new hackers, ones that just run scripts that have they just follow videos on YouTube or instruction guides. Pretty much what we do for class. We're script kiddies, right? We don't have our own ability. We don't write our own code. We don't do our own vulnerabilities. We don't make up our own vulnerabilities, right? So we have low skill level, right? And then there's organization. When you're by yourself, if you're in by yourself, like maybe an insider where you're working in the company and you're acting by yourself, there's not much organization whatsoever. Now, you actually have some amount of skill because you know information about that company you want to go after, and you have a motivation because you're angry at them and you want to damage them, right? But your organization of one, right? As compared to like organized crime. Right? Organized crime, they're going to have many different levels of organization, right? We have like the Sam group, the one that did the ransomware attack on Atlanta. That's one thing the FBI actually likes to comment about them is how well organized they are, at least how they think out the price modeling, right? Is one thing they think well, right? As compared to like cyber terrorists, squirrels. As compared to squirrels are not very well organized. As compared to cyber terrorists, who might not be as well organized as the most organized, which would be nation-state actors, APTs, advanced persistent threats. Okay, so nation-state actors are funded by countries, which is a big deal because they have a lot more resources than pretty much anyone else here, and they hire people and they pay people well, right? So they got a lot of skill because they're paying people well, and those people work for them, right? Check out a podcast called Darknet Diaries. There's a couple stories of people who did work for, I think off the top of my head, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, right? A lot of North Korea is actually a great example. They spun up a nation state. North Korea, which it kind of it caught me off guard. I didn't expect this to happen, but they actually have a pretty decent cyber warfare capability, which didn't make sense to me because they have such a repressed and forced to be ignorant society. In other words, their society is not allowed to play with computers. The kids aren't growing up working on computers, but they were able to spin up a pretty good cyber force because they have lots of resources. They just paid people, right? Well, just pay people, right? We got money, pay for them, right? To them, it's a military investment. So they have the skill. Obviously, they have an organization. A lot of times, these are run pseudo-militaristic operations, and the motivation. It's a nation-state actor. So this is what keeps CIOs up at night, right? As APTs, people who that's why we call them advanced, because they have really good skill, persistent. They're motivated, right? They're getting paid to do this. This is their job, right? And there's a nation-state behind it organizing this, and organization, right? They're well organized, so they're a threat, advanced, persistent, a threat. And then we got good old-fashioned nature itself. I mean, we have natural disasters, which we have to plan for. They're going to go after our accessibility, our confidential. Well, not so much our confidentiality, maybe a little bit. You can think of a scenario, but primarily accessibility and integrity of our data. So we got to back it up. I have squirrels in there because I attended a conference, and one of my favorite ones was someone who makes fun of the one of the big. Squirrels, by far the most damaging thing. So this is a map of all successful cyber threats that have taken down power or infrastructure. And as you can see, Human 3, we're not 100% sure. There's nation-state operations. Okay, Stuxnet was an actual successful attack. So if we drop down to Human. Other animals, I suppose. Anyway, squirrels are by far the most successful, taking out power, causing IT damages, infrastructure damages, right? So, anyway, so that's the joke. It was a really good talk. Anyway, so we also have to worry about nature as well here, right? They're a threat actor in many regards. So what do we have as far as controls to help defend us? How are we going to defend from this? Well, we have we divide them up into 3 categories. We have technical controls. These are the toys. This is the stuff we over-rely on. You can buy a firewall, but if it's misconfigured or your company's just not secure anyway, it doesn't really matter. So we cannot over-rely on this stuff. We think that's the solution. It's the panacea. That's not always what it is. So anyway, but those are the technical controls. So anytime we deploy any kind of technology, that's a technical control, right? Cryptography, antivirus, all those type of things. Okay. Administrative is things we can do as a administrator. Anything we can do as administrators. So with policies, we train our users, we do audits, we hire third parties, or internally we demand our employees audit our systems, our logs, looks at our logs. Those are administrative controls, right? So we have technical controls, administrative controls, and then we have physical controls, right? What are physical controls? These are things we can do, like doors, that's a barrier, right? Monitors, cameras, right? The big thing here is we divide them into 2 categories, broad categories, called active and passive, right? Where we have an active physical control is going to go out and notify or do something, right? So, like case in point, a motion sensor, right? A motion sensor in a computer center. So, if the motion sensor goes off and it's 3 o'clock in the morning and no one should be in there, it's going to send an alert to the administrator saying, "Hey, motion sensor just went off," right? Something's up. That's an active physical control. A passive control is one of my least favorite things that people over rely on is cameras. A camera that's not being watched by an active guard or an AI, which that does exist nowadays. But if we have a camera that's just sitting there taping things, it's not going to do anything. You can go in there and commit as much crime as you want. The camera's not going to stop that person from committing crime. Okay, it's a passive. It might help you solve the crime and figure out who did it, but it's not going to stop it. So therefore, it's passive. All right, so we have some concepts about defense. We have defensive perimeters, right? We're going to try to segregate our traffic. We're going to have the users on one branch of the firewall, servers on another branch. We're going to have two types of server branches off the firewall. We'll have an inside network, which has the crown jewels, right? It's the most secure. We will not allow to punch any holes from the outside to the inside. And then we have the DMZ, right? The DMZ is the servers that need to have people talk to it or initiate the conversation from the internet, right? So therefore it's less trusted, right? We're going to have different trust levels, right? That's what I mean by defensive perimeters. Think of a castle, right? A medieval castle. You might have an outer wall around the entire town. It's too big, you can't defend the whole thing, but that wall helps keep off the riffraff or a small raiding force, right? But it won't keep away a massive army. So that's the first perimeter. Second perimeter, you have the castle walls, right? Excuse me. And you're gonna have a bailey, and you're gonna have a bastion. A bastion's is gonna protect the gate, right? That's kind of like the DMZ, right? That's where we're gonna have the interaction. This is where people come in and out of the castle. And then when you get into the actual core of the castle, right, the deepest part, you're gonna have the keep, right? That's where you keep stuff. That hence the term keep, right? So it's all about perimeters of defense, right? The farther out we go, the less secure it's going to be, but we're creating speed bumps. That's really what we're doing in IT security. Is we're not making, again, I can completely secure data, but that means unplugging it, turning off the computer, and sticking it in the corner, maybe under 20 feet of concrete, putting it in Al Capone's vault, right? So that type of thing. But then it's unaccessible, right? So you can secure things, but it's not usable, right? So what we're really doing is we're putting up enough speed bumps and challenges that we can prevent, that we can make it more difficult for an attacker, right? So another important concept is AAA, which is you want to authenticate, you want to authorize, and you want to audit or account, right? So in other words, all traffic, all interactions, all file access, you want to authenticate. So I want to know who's doing it, right? I want to authorize it based off their authentication, so it's reliant. I'm going to say you can do it, you can't do it, and then I'm going to log it, right? Those are three core components, right? The first two are going to help prevent disasters. The last one is going to help you figure out what happened, right? The logs will hopefully figure out if something goes wrong. Okay, and then finally we got change management. This thing. So we have change management, right? Change management is going to. The problem is IT is constantly changing. We're constantly changing the network. We're putting in new devices, taking out new devices, upgrading this, downgrading that. All that change can cause more vulnerabilities. So we have to be able to control that. So change management is an important concept. All right, that's what I have. That would cover the precursory kind of a review of where we stand right now. In this course, we're going to start off by going deep into controls, and then we're going to get into. So that's the first thing we're going to do, lesson 1, in-depth look at controls. And then we're going to, for lesson 2, talk about secure network design and management. And then for lesson 3, we're going to get in deep about audits, which includes vulnerability penetrations, penetration testing. And then lesson 4, we're going to talk about incident response, which includes forensics, both kind of cool and sexy subject matters. All right, I think I've talked too much already, so I'll talk to you again. All right.